Oh, and with that, I'm gonna kick it over to Black Adam Willis because you, my man.
Yeah, I just got a few things to touch upon with the IFF Boston.
Laying on us, we talked about this a little last week.
We did a little last week. Last week I got to see the movie 8th Grade and a few other films that had come out.
Well, talk to us. What's 8th Grade here?
Well, we talked about 8th Grade last week. That was the Bo Burnham movie.
Ah, yes. You met Bo Burnham.
Yes, Bo Burnham was there at the party.
He signed your guitar.
Yes. I wish I could play guitar if I had one skill. Yeah. Anyway, I met him at one of the after parties for opening night, and they do a few parties during the week. I think the opening night one obviously last Wednesday, and then they do a Friday and a Saturday night thing, and then of course the closing night Wednesday. I don't know if you got to go to that this year.
I got to go to Won't You Be My Neighbor,
yes,
Mr. Rogers picture, which was beautiful.
Yeah, and that's the closing night film. That was on Wednesday, so it's a Wednesday to Wednesday thing. I went Tuesday and I saw Disobedience. Okay. Disobedience was the new film from what's the director's name? Sebastian Leo.
Will not be tolerated.
And he is the director of a movie reviewed not too long ago, A Fantastic Woman. I don't know if you remember.
A Fantastic Woman will not be tolerated.
You done?
I don't know.
But me and Mix, we kind of spearheaded that review last. It won Best Foreign Language Film at the Oscars this past year. So it's actually a movie going to be coming out on DVD and everything soon that you should check out. But his new film Disobedience is something. It's Rachel Weisz is in it. Rachel McAdams is in it, and nice. It starts out kind of the same way as Fantastic Woman did, with like a sudden death, and it's this girl's father, and she has to go from New York. I think it's New York, to London to kind of see about it, and her father was a rabbi, and she's been kind of removed from the church for a long time, the synagogue, and then there's kind of this sexual thing with one of her friends, and there's a kiss, and then it's basically about not spitting in and doing your own thing, and it's a very fast.
Now, was this like a more dramatic, or was it like a cross between like a drama and a comedy?
No, there's not really a comedy at all.
So it's kind of like a legit serious.
Yeah, it's definitely some serious fare.
You said like, oh, she's coming back. She's she hasn't been in touch with the synagogue, so I could just see like a
it's just one of those things. Like I said, it started out like his last film where there's a sudden death, and then it's the kind of the grieving process towards that. And her father, who had passed away, in his will, I think he left the church everything, left her nothing, and she's kind of like scrambling to kind of figure out what's going on. And then in the mix of all that,
he wasn't rich, because I would be pissed.
Well, yeah, there's a lot comes out, and I don't want to ruin too much of it.
God.
Yeah,
you get the joy of knowing you've given to charity.
And he kind of like disowns her, like saying like he's not like her daughter and everything. Wow. So it's
this is as a result of her relationship.
No. This is the relationships kind of happens after that. So she gets together with this guy, and the guy's with this girl who happens to be a childhood friend, and it's played by Alessandro Nivola. He's one of my favorite actors, actually. He was in Jurassic Park 3, I think. He did a movie called Junebug as well.
Is he the brother that got eaten with the satellite phone?
No.
Is he the dude that parachuted through the pterodactyl cage?
I don't remember that movie that much.
Oh, come on, man! That was like a key. Well, okay, it was those.
He was the brother from Face Off of Castor Troy, the one that had his shoe on.
That's all you had to say. Yeah, he's the dude from the pterodactyl cage.
Okay, yeah. I like that guy a lot, but he's in this. He was actually in.
Oh, you just got to reference Face Off. That's the key.
Anytime somebody's in Face Off, you know exactly what he's been in.
Like, what was her name? The sister from Face Off. Oh, Gina Gershon. Yes, of course.
It all comes back. Oh. Plus, the cocaine in the water thing too. He tries to keep them together.
Yeah. Every now and then, I'll just post on my Facebook. I can eat a peach for hours.
For hours, yeah. One of yours, Sean. Anyways, that's enough face-off references. But Disobedience was a heavy movie, man, and this guy
sounds like it. I apologize right after music.
No, right after winning, Best Foreign Language Film, the guy comes out with another film like bang right away. Wow, man, and he's made a great film. First Reformed is another film. I think I kind of touched on it last week. Paul Schrader directed this thing, and the great Paul Schrader, obviously the writer of Taxi Driver. The guy has done a lot of great work, and he was actually in attendance. That's what's great about this festival. I will say that again is not just that you get to see all these movies early, and some of them are really, really great, but also the writers and directors are often in attendance. And whenever you get a chance to go see Paul Schrader introduce his new film, you have to jump at that. This guy's only has a few of those left in him. He's a pretty old guy, but he directed the hell out of this movie.
Damn.
It's got Ethan Hawke
Adam
in
says,
it.
go see these before he's
Ethan
dead.
Hawke, he's
Go
been
see
doing
it.
a lot of good selections.
Man,
lately.
Ethan Hawke is this is what fits him
Like he
perfect.
had that
And-
slump. He had those slump years, but like as of late, like the last maybe 5-7 years, he's made some really good sound.
yeah,
choices.
man, he's worked with some great directors in the past. You know what I mean? And
Someone missed the train on those on the Purge movies though. Like
train.
the Purge movies have gotten better and better since he's been out of the
Since
franchise.
he's been out of the franchise. Sometimes that's the way it works, you know what I mean? Sometimes you die in the car crash in the first Fast and the Furious.
Yeah, until I the Karate Kid.
But anyways,
Whoa,
the one movie
that-
I definitely really wanted to see
Yeah.
is the one you got to see.
Yes, sir.
And that was the closing night film of Won't You Be My Neighbor?
Won't
It's
you
a-
be my
Now, was this like a
Will
doc?
not be
Like, was this like a documentary, or was
This
it like
is
a
a documentary
documentary?
on Mr. Rogers, and this is, from what I hear, kind of a weepy movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
A
this
movie
is
that's
the
pretty
full
emotional,
story
so.
of Fred Rogers, dating all the way back to. It covered the entire span of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, the show, its original origins, how he got involved in television to begin with, and he really came around at just the right time, at just that early point where it was you could just go down to your local TV station, which was just a small room in the back of an office building where they'd set up a couple of cameras and were like filming people. I don't know, like reading
Juggling
books
balls.
and stuff.
Randomness.
Yes.
Yeah. No,
Because
seriously.
there was like nothing on, and he just went down to the public. He basically told his parents, "You know what? I'm gonna hold off on seminary for a while. I wanna go down and see what this public television thing's all about." And he just had ideas. He used to put on a puppet show with his would be wife.
Wow.
And the thing is, she was the host. He had never intended to be an on camera guy. He was always going to be like the producer, and he was going to write stuff and come up with ideas, but it was always going to be like her on film or other people on camera. And what happened one day is there was a breakdown where they didn't have content, and they just had like a lull. And while like the crew had to scramble to like fix stuff, it's like, we just have dead air. We got nothing to show. What can we do? And he's just like grabbed like a random puppet that he found just around the studio, and then like jammed it through. Like literally how Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood started is they needed to fill about 20 seconds of dead air. So he put a puppet on that he just randomly found, jammed his hand through the backdrop, and then just said, "The time is 2:52."
Boom.
And then pulled it back. And apparently, like, kids that were just like paying attention at that one moment loved it.
Yeah.
Parents were writing in. And it just like took off. Where it's like, we want to see more of this.
Well,
puppet.
that's the
It's
thing
like,
that's
okay,
crazy
so we
with that show
That's
is how
awesome.
cheap it was.
Yeah,
And how none of it should have worked. But it's just like, this is so low budget.
Mhm.
The production value is crap. But the message and the sentiment is there. And I
Oh,
only
wait. Wait,
so-
you'll. I'm sorry to cut you off, but you'll love this. The first episode, because that was the wife show.
Mm.
The first episode of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood proper was an allegory against the war. The story was an allegory against the war against the Korean conflict.
Wow.
It's like an
Yes.
episode of MASH. Come on.
Yeah, and
That's
dig this. The premise of it was King Friday feels like King Friday is afraid of change, and he's afraid of cooperating with other countries and expanding his kingdom and growing, allowing all these people from other nations into his kingdom. So he builds a wall.
That's
around-
amazing, man.
And the
Yeah.
whole thing was
See, he's
beautiful
radical,
because-
man. Yeah, he did a bunch of
but this
things,
was
like
even-
A Week on Death.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Talk about what
Every
does
show-
assassination mean for kids. It's important.
Yeah, every show was centered around a theme, and he did some really heavy topics.
Heavy,
covering
heavy,
war,
heavy.
covering racism,
Now
covering
when
sexism,
did
kids
he-
learning about AIDS.
When did he start
Divorce.
doing like
Mhm.
the famous introduction, like, hey, coming in and getting dressed
That-
into the wool? So
See,
did that go
here's-
That's
into
the
that?
thing. Oh,
Here's the thing. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but I didn't realize this. I kind of came to the realization actually not too long ago. Is what I took from Mr. Rogers without really knowing it is
You look great in
whenever.
a sweater vest.
Well, yes, obviously that. But when I come in from the outside, I change my clothes to like inside clothes.
Yeah.
Like when I get home, like if I'm like
That's
home, when
true.
I get home, I literally like take off a shirt and put on another shirt.
Mhm.
I'll change my shoes and
Yeah.
like I put indoor clothes on because when he did that introduction, we did the song, and if you He'd change his sweater. He'd
Were
change
you
his
like an
sneakers.
avid watcher of Mr. Rogers?
Oh yeah, big
Yeah,
time, big
me
time.
too.
You know, I actually like really thankful that I grew up with that because
It's
like I
funny
said,
because
a lot
like
of really
I do that
heavy
with my
subjects.
kid. He'll come home and I'm like, dude, change your clothes. He'll be like, dude, no. I'm like, change your. And I get in an argument with him, and then I'm like, well, that's just probably a generational thing now. No,
Yeah, but
I'm like, you
it's
just
definitely a Mr.
totally,
Rogers
like,
thing. I think I
saved
definitely
this
got it from
kid's
that
butt
because
for
I
the
was.
next year.
It was a great picture. You got
It's
a
awesome.
lot of like wonderful information. And you saw how deep it really went. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood almost didn't happen. And
Yeah.
at several points, they tried to cancel it. And he was the voice. This is a famous story where he actually spoke to Congress when they were
Yeah.
trying to cut
I remember.
cut funding for public television.
Mhm.
And basically, he just went on. He went on there, and everyone will tell the story as Mr. Rogers went up, and he had a plan, and he set them all straight and told them the importance. It's like, no, hear his wife tell it. He was nervous as hell, and he didn't know what to say, so he just wrote this long ass. He wrote like a bunch of his favorite Bible verses on like this this paper, and he's like, this will take about 10 minutes to read. And by the time he finally got to speak, because a bunch of different PBS representatives were going in succession. By the time he finally got to speak, the senator was pretty much like done. He's like, you know what, I don't want to hear any more of this. We're just gonna cut the funding. But I guess we have to finish the list because you all were nice enough to come down here anyways.
Yeah.
So Mr. Rogers, and he was just completely glib and didn't care. You could not there was no give a fness left in this man, and you could hear it in the actual footage, and the footage is in the documentary where you see this man like he's just completely checked out. He doesn't care. He's like, okay, who's left on the list? Okay, we have Fred Rogers. Okay, Mr. Rogers, please speak your piece, and then we'll vote. But I think we all know how it's gonna go. And I'm like, damn, okay. Way to be impartial.
Yeah.
And you can see him in his face, and he's just nervous, and he doesn't know what to say. And he's like, well, I was going to read this, but since I'm not really given much time, this will take about 10 minutes to read, and I guess I'll just speak from the heart and let you know. And he gives, apparently just completely improvised, this 3 minutes of the most heartfelt. Yeah, dude. It's like, I've heard it before, but to hear it from his lips in this context, in this documentary on the big screen, and I'm there just like, wow, that's... What?
The man.
Why's my face wet? You know? and the whole thing was, it's just like, you'd think it'd be completely sappy, but it really paints him as you see he was a real person. He wasn't just like the mythical Mr. Rogers, and he wasn't this saint. One of the things, a couple of the stories that Mr. Policeman tells. Mr. Policeman was a brother. Well, that was a black dude in the 60s and 70s working on this show, and he was gay. And they there was a point where they tried to remove him from the show because they didn't feel that his lifestyle represented the wholesome image. And Fred Rogers was the one that's like, no, I want this man to stay. And he was a minister. Never like was heavy-handed with religion. I didn't know this about the show, you know, but he always brought those values and always made kids feel comfortable. And the whole thing with him, like, we all have this idea of Mr. Rogers as like the ultimate wholesome individual. There's got to be some deep, dark stuff. And I think he's one of the few people, and you really get it from this. He's one of those few people.
That's what I think.
Cartoonishly good.
Yeah, and it's like you need that now. It's like it's so divisive now, and it's like we speak into this echo chamber. It's like social media, and everyone's arguing, and people are faking, or maybe realistically really just mad, you know what I mean? And it's just the whole thing. But it's like a guy that's that pure is something we need, you know what I mean?
Definitely.
And it's like I really do, like I said, I'm thankful that I had him growing up to kind of like guide me. I think a lot of the shows now, it's just kind of too pandering. It's a little bit too dumbed down.
But I think
you know
also,
but our age-old argument now is like, you know, they're trying to cut funding for PBS
again.
You know what I mean? Like this, it's like right back to the original fight for just free speech. It's
a never-ending thing, and it's just like we need a Fred Rogers now more than ever.
Well, it's very cyclical, and one thing I find is different generations require different motivation. I think Mr. Rogers was ours. Mr. Rogers was our parents. Mr. Rogers was one of the few that was lucky enough to span ages. I can't think of anyone from our childhood besides him, maybe that's gone to that level. We have folks like Bill Nye now who are childhood icons who now are voices for science and progression. But no one has the same level, the same depth that Mr. Rogers had. And that's a weird thing to say, because for most of your life, there was a time when you loved Mr. Rogers as a kid to a time when Mr. Rogers was that thing you remember.
But
that's
believe it or not,
for kids.
Bill Nye's even more controversial because he's science. There's people who don't believe science.
Yeah,
you can't not believe in goodness. You know what I mean? It just seems so obviously wrong to go against some wholesome values. You know what I mean? It's just
I
easier person to kind of allot yourself with.
Absolutely. I highly recommend this, mostly because if you're attached to Mr. Rogers, you would love this. If you're not, it's interesting to learn. I wouldn't recommend most millennials go out and check this out, because if you didn't grow up with this show, then it's just an interesting story about someone who's been dead for years and did something. It's like interesting to know, but I don't think they'll take away the same reverence that anyone who was attached to this at some point in life, which is kind of a bummer, but it's just a hard fact. But if you did ever watch episodes of Mr. Rogers growing up, and if you did ever feel like you learned something,
well, you should go to see it if you don't know Mr. Rogers, because then you're like, damn, this is what I missed. That sucks.
Well, it's called Won't You Be My Neighbor. It's playing at the festival now. I'm really hoping that they do a run.
They are going to do a run. They're doing it at the Coolidge. That'll be
fantastic.
It'll be in theaters for a bit, I believe. Yeah.
If you're not local to Boston, find your local independent theater and see if it's playing, because it's definitely worth the watch. It's called Won't You Be My Neighbor. And dude, there's so many more stories I want to tell, but I acknowledge that I've already gone over time. And there's like all like cool, like why his weight was such a significant part of his life. And the letters and the numbers 143 meant this. And the people protested his funeral. Yeah, dude, there's just so much out there, and it all comes out in this documentary, and it was such a good viewing. So it's called Won't You Be My Neighbor, the story of Mr. Rogers. I highly recommend it. Absolutely.
Imagine being the family of somebody who protested Mr. Rogers.
Man.
Like, that's going to be like, it's like my grandpa was a Nazi sympathizer. It's like, you never bring that up at a party.
You just get punched in the face. Like, you just get punched in the face. Like, dude,
yeah,
really?
it's
Fred
like,
Rogers, really,
Fred,
bro?
right,
What's messed up is they had like footage of that too, and there was like parents who brought their kids there, and you've never seen such miserable looking children.
It's just like, it's like
you...
people who expose their children to all sorts of stuff. It's like just teaching them to hate from a young thing. It's like that picture of the little kid wearing a Nazi KKK clan hood. You know what I mean? The kid's way too young. He doesn't know what's going on, but he's looking and like making a face at a black police officer.
This is the world we live in.
You know what I mean? It's wild.
All right. Well, on that cheery note, Rick Olive has the inside.